Well, another day in America, huh? 2 killed and 28 wounded in mass shooting at Baltimore block party early Sunday. That's today. They were running for their lives, is the quote that comes along with the title. An evening block party that started as a joyful celebration of the Brooklyn community turned into a terrifying scramble for safety when at least 2 shooters opened fire early Sunday morning. I'm assuming... Yeah, Brooklyn's the name of this neighborhood in Baltimore. It's a little confusing, I imagine, for some people. South Baltimore's Brooklyn neighborhood was hosting its annual Brooklyn Day community event when gunfire erupted, wounding dozens and killing 2. Police officers responded to multiple shooting reports at around 12:35 a.m. Sunday morning in the 800 block of Gretna Court. An 18-year-old woman and a 20-year-old man died from the shooting, authorities said. 28 other gunshot victims were transported or walked into area hospitals for treatment. 3 of those 28 were in critical condition as of early Sunday morning. Later Sunday, officials said their preliminary investigation indicated 14 of the 28 surviving shooting victims were under age 18. The Sunday violence is likely the largest shooting in Baltimore in at least a decade, possibly ever. The Gun Violence Archive, a DC-based nonprofit that documents the nation's shootings, lists no city incidents with more than half a dozen victims since 2014, the earliest mass shooting report available. So this is a pretty big deal. It comes as Baltimore continues to grapple with persistently high levels of violent crime, notching more than 300 homicides last year for the 8th in a row. Attention this year has increasingly centered around young people who are committing or falling victim to gun violence. Acting Baltimore Police Commissioner Richard Worley said that there were at least 2 people who fired shots, but that police were still investigating the total number. He said it's not yet known whether the shootings were targeted or the results of shooters firing indiscriminately. Officials encouraged anyone with information or video footage to share it with police. This was a reckless, cowardly act that happened here and has permanently altered many lives and cost 2 people their lives, Mayor Brandon Scott said at a news conference. I want those responsible to hear me very clearly. We will not stop until we find you, and we will find you. I like that, actually. I like that messaging. In the hours before the shooting, neighbors got to work grilling hot dogs and hamburgers to feed the community, always serving children first. There were pony rides, face painting, and dance competitions, local rappers, and a DJ in the streets surrounding Gretna Court, with more than 100 attendees at points during the evening. It was like a big block party. Then, shots broke out in the crowd. Terry Brown was standing outside his house on 8th Street when he heard the resounding succession of gunfire. A sea of people ran from the courtyard above, jumping fences and calling out for loved ones. Some tripped and fell in the panic. They were running for their lives, Brown said. In the rush, Brown let 5 teens take shelter in his house. Standing on the same street later Sunday morning, Brown pointed to the end of the sidewalk. A girl got shot right there, he said. Neighbors held compression on victims' bodies, while others loaded wounded into cars. The young girl on the sidewalk was limp by the time she was lifted and placed into a car. It was so many kids. It was chaos, Brown said. Parents were running around looking for their children, hollering and screaming, and don't know if their children had a bullet in them. He recalled some parents in the crowd before the shooting had babies strapped to their backs. Who would pull up and do something like this, he asked. It's just plain evil. Later Sunday morning, remnants of the community cookout were scattered in the courtyard. A snowball truck rested behind the police caution tape. A camping chair sat abandoned near an evidence marker. Plastic cups were scattered on the ground. Officers on the scene worked behind police tape and spanning multiple streets around the court where the main party was held. Worley, the acting police commissioner, called the gathering an unpermitted event. So, that's your sign right there already, that, it was a black neighborhood. It was a block party in a black neighborhood, so the police commissioner's response is, of course, to say, well, let's be clear, this wasn't even a lawful party in the first place, okay? The street is for cars, and having a big neighborhood party in the street is not allowed, okay? This is actually very much tied into the topic we've been covering of, like, us very desperately as a society here in America needing to make neighborhoods in something more like villages. Streets are not, like, they're not public property. You're not allowed to go into the street and, like, do stuff in the street. I believe there are some cities that have made this allowed. Fuck, I watched a video about this recently. But that, I don't want to get much into it, but, like, yeah, of course the cops would try to do some, like, well, you're not allowed to have, like, a community event in the street, so, yeah, we're gonna have to, you know, it was honestly not even lawful in the first place. I don't know. 2 residents told the Baltimore Sun that there was not a police presence at the event, unlike in previous years. The president of the Fraternal Order of Police Lodge representing Baltimore police officers raised concerns Sunday that the patrol shift at the time of the shooting was short-handed. If we made mistakes, we will fix them and move forward so it never happens again, Worley said. But again, we did not know that this event was occurring. Okay, but like, why would you try to, like, toss blame on them for doing the event when it's the police? Like, okay, it is the police's job to be ready when disaster strikes to do their job, okay? It is not the citizens' job to constantly make sure that there are cops close enough and around that they can respond to potential emergency. The onus is on the police to do that. That is what they're paid for. It's what they're overpaid for, in fact. And, yeah, I don't think the onus is on you to, like, let the cops know, to invite the cops to your block party in order to have, like, a chance of there not being a 30 casualty shooting at your block party, you know? The fact that such a large-scale act of violence occurred is an affront to the safety and well-being of our residents, she said. We owe it to ourselves and our community to demand better consideration for our lives. Some neighbors said they did not want to be identified out of fear for their safety Sunday. One such woman said her son's best friend was one of those shot. He was taken to the hospital and is resting, she said. Her son was standing beside his car at the time, she added, and could feel the bullets whizzing by. The community has gotten less safe in the past 5 years, she said. Not a day goes by where we don't hear gunshots. Tom, who declined to give his last name, fielded phone calls as he walked on nearby 6th Street. Growing up in South Baltimore, he's attended this event his entire life, he said. This year, his family brought his grandmother and teenage nieces to the party, who went home before the shooting. He said he knows 11 of the victims, ranging in ages of 14 to 22. Innocent kids keep getting hurt, he said, eyes brimming with tears. As you can imagine, due to the fact that this happened in a predominantly black neighborhood, the response on social media, namely Twitter, has been what you'd expect it to be. You see, there are 3 perspectives I think you can take on gun violence in this country. And the people that are going viral with their blue check marks on Twitter are taking the first and arguably one of the more popular perspectives. The argument is that guns aren't the problem, it's who has the guns that's the problem. And the problem is that these black people just can't stop shooting each other in cities like Baltimore and whatnot. They argue this. I don't know if you've seen Twitter today, if you look under, like, mass shooting or anything like that, but you will see rows of blue check marks tweeting about how, no, it's not the guns, or it's who has the guns, and the problem of who has the guns is that black people have the guns, and black people just can't stop killing other black people. That's literally what they're arguing, just straightforwardly. They're not getting banned for it, they know they won't get banned for it, so they're taking the mask off. They're just straight up saying, the problem is black people having guns because they kill each other. That is literally what they're saying. Nazi Twitter, yeah. And those are the most, like, top posts when you look at, like, anything about this shooting on Twitter. And then you get rate limited before you can see anything that's not Nazi tweets. However, there is two more perspectives you could take. The other perspective is more commonly like the Democrat perspective, which is the, listen, other countries do not have this problem. Other, like, modern Western countries that are, you know, arguably comparable to the United States in a lot of different areas do not have this problem. And the reason they don't have these problems is because they have very, very strict gun control, or sometimes outright do not allow ownership of guns as a whole, or have very, very limited, like, allowances of what kind of guns you can have, right? And in many countries, this has had a very positive effect. Granted, you could argue that there's been a basic, that hole of what would have been gun violence has been filled in by knife violence and by physical assaults, but, you know, you add guns to the equation and things get a lot more lethal. While there isn't necessarily more violence in America, due to guns being such a massive factor, American homicide, or American, you know, violent crime is particularly deadly. It's very disproportionately deadly due to the fact that criminals in America have such easy access to firearms. In large part due to the fact that for every person in America, there are 14 guns. And I know I sound like I'm anti-gun right now. I know I sound like I'm anti-gun. I am not anti-gun. Listen, I swear to God, I'm not. I love shooting guns. I love guns, okay? I love shooting guns. Super fun. I want to buy guns as soon as I've been in the state long enough that I have the proper paperwork necessary to get my, my first gun in this state, because I just moved here. You have to have a certain amount of bills and shit to verify your identity and get the background check. But, you have to recognize reality where it's there. However, what libs will argue about guns being the problem is not entirely true. Because the vast majority of shootings, like you would think that if the problem was that criminals have access to high-capacity magazines with fast fire rates and very, like, decent recoil mitigating, add-ons and attachments, if that is the concern, then you would think that, like, the AR-15, for example, would represent a massive proportion of gun violence in America, even when it comes to, like, violent shootings, right? But handguns do. Handguns are the actually most represented. Yeah, it's 90% handguns. So when Democrats, which have been overwhelmingly, Biden included, a lot of big Democrats, Biden's the biggest one, and I'm sure Kamala Harris is on board with it too if Biden is banning AR-15s. My state has done this. I cannot buy a semi-auto rifle, period, in this state. The governor passed that bill a couple months ago, and the effect of that now means that recently, the time when this bill passed was when a bunch of, there was a big spike in gun purchases because of COVID. And most of these gun purchases, ironically enough, were people living in the suburbs and the city who were more progressive-leaning. Because most of the, like, Nazi, chud, white bro conservative types already have massive armories, right? They have tons of guns. They have a massive armory of guns. But here in the state, they banned the sale of semi-auto rifles and the buying of them. Which basically means now all the Nazi redneck militia guys up in the mountains are strapped to the fucking teeth. But I can't go buy a semi-auto rifle for shooting at the range. But meanwhile, those guys are in Telegram group chats talking about how they want to roll into the city and mow down all the minorities and Democrat voters. That tends to be the actual effect of banning something like the AR-15. Not to mention, let's be real, AR-15s are fun as fuck to shoot, okay? Go to the range with an AR-15, it's fun, okay? They're fun, and they're nice. They're nice guns, okay? I want to have an AR-15, and I'm mad that I can't. I think being able to shoot one at the range with my friends would be absolutely a blast, and I'm mad that I can't here. Unless it's like a friend's AR-15, or I rent one. Granted, you can rent semi-auto rifles at ranges, so that's nice. Regardless, though, it's a big pain in the ass. Banning these things only punishes the people who bought them legally, have a non-defaced serial number, got their background check, they keep it safely stored, it's not going to get stolen and used for a crime. Like, the people who get punished by that kind of thing are the law-abiding citizens who have their guns because they like guns, they appreciate them, they like shooting sports, they go to the range with their friends. Those are the people that get punished, pissed off, and hella alienated from voting Democrat, by the way, when these bills pass. And it's not even that effective, because most of the gun violence is done with pistols. And then finally, we've got the third position I feel you could take. My position. The based position. Guns are not necessarily the problem, but also they are. You see, the guns have to come from somewhere. The illegal guns that are obtained by criminals come from somewhere. Even though there's a lot of guns out there now, you can still stem the flow of shady gun acquisition being distributed out into the criminal sphere, right? So you could adopt a policy much like what Canada does. I actually like what Canada does. In Canada, if you want to own a gun, you have to sign up for a permit. And if you own a gun, you get added onto a database. And you have a background check run on you daily. And you lose your rights to own a gun, and you have your guns confiscated, and every gun is like, verified, and, like, it's like, tracked and everything. And your daily background checked. And it's a very secure system. And Canada does not have shootings, in case you know, and there are guns in Canada. Canada has guns. I know we meme about there not being guns in Canada, but, like, yeah, daily background check to own a gun in Canada. But, like, Canada does not have shootings, and the reason is law-abiding, like, gun owners don't typically commit shootings. Like, they don't generally do that. It's very rare. When it does happen, it's an accident, it's a negligent discharge, or a suicide attempt. But yeah. But then we have to talk about who has the guns. You see, the Nazis, much like with the 1350 stat, are pointing out a real statistic, but they're warping it for racist means, right? There is a big problem with gun violence and black youth, particularly black men, in the inner city. A lot of young black kids are getting involved in gang violence. And you may think, like, wait, Zan, isn't that racist? Isn't that racist? No, it's not. Because they're doing it for the same reason that any other crime gets committed. It's because they don't have they're poor. They're poor. A lot of conservatives will bring up the homicide rate and say, how does this homicide rate, how is that explained by poverty? And it's like, what do you think criminal organizations do? Like, I don't know if you've ever been to the hood or talked to somebody who grew up in the hood, but, like, I have a friend who's currently in prison right now because he got in with the wrong crowd back in Florida and did armed robbery. And someone got shot. It's very unfortunate, but, like, that kind of shit fucking happens when you're growing up in a very bad neighborhood. You get in with the wrong crowd, and the only way that you're going to be able to continue to run with that crowd and continue to make enough money to keep yourself going, your family going, who knows what you're paying for, is maybe you have to rob a store. Maybe you have to rob a drug dealer's house. Maybe you end up having to shoot someone. Gang shootouts are a product of wealth disparity and poverty. And that is where a large proportion of gun violence in America comes from. If you get rid of all of these root causes of systemic injustice that have put the black community in America down for so many, like, centuries, gun violence goes from boop to boop. Like, you get rid of all these, like, racial injustice issues, and, oh, look at that, gun violence goes down. It's all connected. The vast majority of policies and beliefs that progressives advocate for in America would sort of passively result in gun violence severely decreasing. The solution here is not to ban guns. Trust me, that's only going to get, like, people to vote Republican more. The solution is to make Democrats wrap their gun rhetoric in more pro-legal gun ownership sort of wording, in the same way that Republicans wrap up their anti-immigrant rhetoric and like, oh, but we love legal immigration. We love our legal immigrants. The wall is going to have a ginormous door, a big gate for legal immigrants to come in legally. You know, like, the Democrats need to do the version of that, but with guns. We love legal. Yeah, Jack, I love legal gun owners, man. Yeah, as long as you're legally owning your gun and you're doing it safely, man, I love that. You know, there's nothing more American than going to the range, and if you're a legal gun owner out there, you should be the most pissed about these mass shootings, Jack. Like, if that was the messaging Biden had, I feel like he'd be alienating so much fewer Democrats from potentially voting Republican. Oh, and also, for a little bit of insight on the recidivism rate, my friend from back in Florida, who's currently serving in prison for armed robbery, if I recall correctly, I think he robbed a drug dealer's house with a gun, and someone got shot. I don't know all the details, but someone got shot. This is his second time. This is him going back after a very short period of time out. Like, weeks out. It's a very vicious, rough cycle. It's a very, very vicious, rough cycle. The over-policing, the school-to-prison pipeline, the generations of discrimination that have led to, like, you can map out neighborhoods based on race. That exists because legally, banks were allowed to just not loan to people of a certain race. And so you couldn't get a loan for a house. And so you had to get what you could get. And so those neighborhoods are where, like, colored families from back in the day were able to move into because they weren't allowed to move anywhere else. If you were Asian, you had to move into, like, you'd be denied a loan. If you were black, you'd be denied a loan. Hispanic, denied a loan. And you'd have to move into much, much cheaper areas. And we're talking decades ago, like a century ago, okay? And that carries forward. That doesn't dissolve over, like, a generation or two. This is still going to be affecting people in these neighborhoods and in these communities for generations into the future. But as I mentioned, colored canceled? Well, that's the terminology from back then and broadening it because that's how the policy was written. But, like, all these policies that progressives advocate for, besides, like, banning, like, AR-15s and stuff, things like reallocating funding of police to stuff that's actually more suited to handling a broader diversity of situations and not, you know, maybe having more accountability for the police, body cams, investing in programs that will... There's a long list of things the left advocates for. Prison reform. We could go down the list, right? All of these things, as a consequence, would take a tremendous bite out of gun violence in this country. The truth is, the guns aren't the problem. The people using the guns are the problem. And that's not the people's fault. It's the circumstances those people are in that are the problem. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but every left-wing policy, for the most part, is trying to get to the root of what causes those circumstances. I hope this made sense. You have, of course, all the Nazis on Twitter that are doing their, That sounded weird. I hope you have a great day every day. Wait, what? Oh, okay, you're talking to someone else. As you can imagine, all the tweets about this on Twitter are all Nazis. Like, it's like blue checkmark conservative dads who have, like, their profile picture is them with their hat on, like their ball cap and their sunglasses on in their truck. And they're tweeting about how, look at these crime rate statistics. The problem isn't the guns, it's black people having guns. Black people just can't stop killing each other, and they're taking away the fun of guns from all us good, law-abiding white people. That's basically the sentiment that you're seeing trending on Twitter. I'm not even kidding. Like, I looked at Twitter, and I scrolled, and I hit the rate limit before I found any tweets that weren't Nazi shit. It's actually insane. Oh, and you better believe because, like, the right is taking, like, the racial side of this shooting, you won't see them doing the whole, like, pro-2A thing on this, nearly as much. They're gonna be trying to push racism more than pro-gun shit.